Evan Mitchell stared at his trembling hands as he stepped into Barbara Watson's office. The hospital call from Boston still echoed in his ears. His father, gone without warning. Heart failure. The words felt hollow, clinical, unable to capture the enormity of the loss. Thomas Mitchell, the retired Army veteran who had raised him alone since his mother's passing, had slipped away in the early hours of the morning. Barbara sat behind her oversized desk, typing furiously as though her keyboard had personally offended her. The walls of her office were plastered with company awards and the obligatory Diversity and Inclusion certificate that Tech Future proudly displayed while practicing something entirely different. "I need time off," Evan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "My dad passed away this morning. The funeral's in Boston, so I'd need 4 days. It's a 2-hour flight each way, and I need to handle his affairs." Barbara didn't look up, fingers still clucking away. "You can have 2?" Evan blinked, certain he'd misheard. "It's a 2-hour flight each way. I need to arrange the funeral and handle his estate." She finally glanced up, not a hint of sympathy crossing her face. "You can attend virtually. We're in the middle of the Westfield migration. Everyone's expected here." The words struck harder than anticipated. 3 years at Tech Future. 3 years building their systems. Staying late, coming in sick, covering for management's poor planning. "I've never taken a sick day," Evan said, voice tightening. "Never asked for anything." Barbara leaned back, sighing as though he was an inconvenience rather than a grieving son. "This is business. We all make sacrifices." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Besides, I imagine that type of funeral isn't particularly important to families like yours." The comment hung in the air, another thinly veiled reference to his sexuality. Like the time she'd accidentally excluded him from the company family picnic invitation. "Fine," Evan said quietly. 2 days. As he walked back through the office, past the same gray cubicles he'd occupied for over 1,000 days, his gaze fell on the small rainbow flag pinned to his bulletin board. Beside it sat a framed photo from last year's Boston Pride Parade, his father in a Proud Dad t-shirt, arm wrapped around Evan's shoulders, both smiling broadly. The same father who had once struggled to accept him was now gone, while those who claimed to value diversity continued to erase him. Something within Evan broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely and irreversibly. Have you ever reached that breaking point? The moment when you realize your worth isn't recognized until you take it all away. Follow Heart Stories for more stories that remind us sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what diminishes us and toward what allows us to stand tall. The apartment felt unnaturally still when Evan returned home that evening. He dropped his bag by the door and stood motionless in the darkness, not bothering to turn on lights. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 11:47 p.m., its green glow the only illumination in the room. His father was gone, and not one person from that office would stand beside him when they laid Thomas Mitchell to rest. Evan moved to his bedroom and lay flat on his back, staring at the ceiling as memories washed over him. His father had not always been his champion. When Evan came out at 17, Thomas, the decorated Army veteran with traditional values, had struggled immensely. There had been weeks of strained silence, awkward dinners, and painful misunderstandings. But unlike Barbara Watson, Thomas Mitchell had chosen growth over prejudice. The turning point had come after a heated argument when Evan was preparing to leave for college. His father had found him packing, ready to vanish from home permanently, instead of another confrontation. Thomas had sat on the edge of the bed and spoken words that would forever change their relationship. "I don't understand everything about who you are, but I understand what it means to love my son, and I will never let my confusion become more important than that love." In the years that followed, Thomas had transformed. He joined a support group for parents of LGBTQ+ children. He attended Pride events. He challenged his old Army buddies when they made homophobic comments. He became the father Evan had always needed, the one who told him, "You don't need to make yourself smaller so others can feel bigger." At 2:30 a.m., Evan rose from the bed and opened his laptop. He logged into the company system remotely, something he'd done countless times during holidays, weekends, and late nights when others couldn't be bothered to fix their own messes. This time was different. Evan navigated directly to his personal folders. He didn't touch client data or project files that weren't his. What he sought were the tools he'd built from scratch during countless unpaid overtime hours: integration manuals, troubleshooting guides, API documentation that nobody else understood, automation scripts that kept systems running when management refused to allocate proper resources. Most of it he'd created on his own time, the rest while covering gaps no one else bothered to fill. There was another folder too, one where he'd meticulously documented every discriminatory comment, every exclusionary practice, every instance when Barbara had treated the company's LGBTQ+ employees differently. Evidence he'd collected not for himself, but to protect junior staff who faced similar treatment. Now he was taking it all back. His fingers moved with methodical precision, zipping files, encrypting folders, downloading everything that represented his unrecognized contributions. By 6:00 a.m., he had scrubbed every version from the shared drives, replacing them with a single text file, documentation removed by original author, no backup available. Then he opened a new email, subject line, formal resignation, effective immediately, no lengthy explanation, no gratitude for the opportunity, just 2 short paragraphs that ended his 3-year commitment to a company that couldn't spare him 4 days to bury his father. As the first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, Evan booked the earliest flight to Boston. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of pretense lifting from his shoulders. Sometimes reclaiming your dignity requires walking away from those who never recognized its value in the first place. The aircraft touched down in Boston under a steel-gray sky that matched Evan's mood. During the flight, his phone had vibrated incessantly with notifications, increasingly urgent messages from TechFuture discovering that critical systems were failing without documentation. Evan had silenced it all, allowing himself this space to grieve without interruption. He collected a rental car and drove towards South End, the diverse Boston neighborhood where he'd grown up. Rainbow flags still hung from many storefronts and residences, remnants of the Pride celebration from the previous month. His father had stood proudly among those crowds just last year, a transformation that still felt miraculous given where they'd started. The Mitchell family home appeared exactly as Evan remembered, a 2-story brick structure with worn stone steps and a massive oak tree dominating the front yard. Thomas had planted that tree the day Evan was born, telling anyone who would listen that it would grow strong and tall just like his son. Now its branches stretched protectively over the roof, leaves rustling in the afternoon breeze. Standing at the front door, key in hand, Evan hesitated. Entering meant accepting that his father would never again greet him with their traditional bear hug and terrible dad jokes. It meant acknowledging the finality of death in a way that the hospital call hadn't managed to convey. Inside, the house held Thomas Mitchell's presence in every corner. His boots still stood by the door as if he might return to claim them. A coffee mug sat half full on the kitchen counter, his reading glasses perched atop the newspaper he had never finished. The air still carried the faint scent of his aftershave, mingled with the coffee he brewed religiously each morning. Evan moved through the rooms slowly, trailing his fingers along familiar surfaces, before finally making his way to his father's workshop in the converted garage. The space had always been Thomas's sanctuary, a place of creation and contemplation. The smell of wood and varnish enveloped Evan as he stepped inside, bringing an unexpected wave of comfort. On the workbench sat his father's final project, an unfinished rainbow bookcase. Thomas had mentioned it during their last phone call, describing it as something special for the community center. Beside it lay his tools, arranged with military precision, waiting for hands that would never return. As Evan examined the workshop, he discovered a hidden album tucked beneath a stack of woodworking magazines. Inside were photographs documenting every significant moment of Evan's life, from childhood baseball games to college graduation, his first corporate job, and finally, pride parades. Some photos dated back to the difficult period when Thomas had still struggled with acceptance, proving he had always been watching, always caring, even when he couldn't fully understand. The next morning, Evan met with the funeral director to finalize arrangements. He selected his father's army dress uniform for the burial, but added personal touches: his Red Sox cap and a small rainbow pin for the lapel, representing the journey they had taken together. As he completed the paperwork, his phone began buzzing again with a new barrage of messages from Tech Future. The Westfield migration was collapsing without his documentation. For the first time since leaving Chicago, Evan smiled faintly. Sometimes the universe delivers justice in unexpected ways, teaching those who devalue others that true worth becomes most visible in absence. After the funeral service, which brought together a surprising number of people whose lives Thomas Mitchell had touched, Evan finally responded to the desperate messages from Tech Future. He agreed to a video call but set his own terms. It would happen on his schedule, not theirs, and he would not be rushed through his grief to solve their crisis. The meeting began precisely at the time Evan specified. Barbara Watson appeared on screen first, her usual composed demeanor noticeably frayed. Marcus Daniels, the company's CEO, joined in next, along with Sophia Reyes from legal. The forced, sympathetic expressions couldn't mask their desperation. First, Marcus began, voice carefully modulated. "We're very sorry about your father." Evan offered no response, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Barbara broke first. "We need access to your documentation. The Westfield migration is falling apart without it. Critical systems are failing." "My documentation?" Evan asked with deliberate calm. "You built it on company time." Sophia interjected. "It's considered work product and company property." Evan allowed himself a slight smile. "You mean the integration guides I created after hours because the training budget was repeatedly denied, the troubleshooting workflows I developed on weekends, the API documentation I wrote because no one else bothered to learn how they worked. That documentation." Marcus leaned forward. "Westfield is threatening to pull out entirely. Their entire reporting system is non-functional. We're facing potential contract violations." "That sounds like a management problem," Evan replied, sipping from a mug that had belonged to his father. "Fortunately, I have a solution." He outlined his terms with precision. He would consult at $350 per hour with a minimum 30-hour commitment, paid in advance. He would work according to his own schedule while handling his father's estate. And he would require a formal written apology for the denial of bereavement leave, along with a commitment to review the company's discriminatory practices. "That's extortion," Barbara snapped, color rising in her cheeks. "It's supply and demand." Evan countered, "I have something you need. The market determines the price." Marcus rubbed his forehead in obvious distress. "We can't approve that kind of expenditure without going through finance." "Then talk to finance," Evan said. "But the clock is ticking, and Westfield won't wait while you search for backups that don't exist." What followed was a tense negotiation that ended exactly as Evan knew it would, with Tech Future transferring funds to his account and agreeing to all conditions. The company that couldn't spare him 4 days of bereavement leave was now paying premium rates for his expertise, delivered entirely on his terms. During the consulting sessions that followed, Evan methodically walked the team through each system failure, pointing out the design flaws and management decisions that had created vulnerabilities. He didn't soften his assessment or protect egos. The truth was laid bare. Their crisis stemmed from undervaluing both their technical staff and proper documentation. After the final session, Marcus requested a private conversation. His offer came as no surprise. Technical director position, 50% salary increase, remote work from Boston, and a seat on the executive planning committee. "That's not why I left," Evan said quietly. "We're trying to make it right." Marcus insisted. "You're trying to solve a crisis." Evan corrected him. "You didn't offer me advancement when I earned it through 3 years of exceptional work. You only recognized my value when I took everything away from you. That's not respect. It's desperation." He described the culture of discrimination Barbara had fostered, the comments she had made about his lifestyle, the systematic exclusion of LGBTQ plus employees from advancement opportunities. He revealed that 3 other employees had already resigned after hearing about his experience. The problem isn't the role or the money, Evan concluded. It's that I had to become invisible to finally be seen. True respect isn't measured by compensation offered in crisis, but by dignity afforded in everyday interactions. Those who only value what they have lost rarely understand why it left in the first place. 1 month after declining Tech Future's desperate offer, Evan began a new chapter at Rainbow Tech, a smaller Boston-based company founded by Jordan Kim, who had faced similar discrimination at a previous employer. The contrast in workplace culture was immediately apparent. Team members were valued for their contributions rather than their conformity. Work-life balance wasn't just a recruitment slogan, but a practiced reality. On his first day, Jordan welcomed him with simple words that resonated deeply. "We hired you because of who you are, not despite it." For Evan, it felt like finally being able to breathe without restriction. News from Chicago arrived through former colleagues. Westfield had indeed terminated their contract with Tech Future. Several other clients had followed suit after hearing about the company's practices. The stock price had plummeted, and the board had finally taken action. Barbara Watson had been terminated, and the company had hired a diversity consultant to reform their corporate culture. An unexpected LinkedIn message appeared from Marcus. "You were right about everything. We built the wrong culture and lost sight of what matters. I'm sorry we didn't listen sooner." Evenings and weekends found Evan in his father's workshop, hands busy completing the rainbow bookcase Thomas had begun. Each piece of wood he shaped connected him to his father's memory. When finished, he donated it to the local LGBTQ+ community center, along with a small plaque bearing Thomas's name and the words, "Growth is always possible." Using a portion of his consulting fees, Evan established the Thomas Mitchell Scholarship Fund for LGBTQ+ students pursuing careers in technology. The first recipient would begin classes at MIT that fall, a young transgender woman with exceptional coding skills who had faced rejection from her own family. Evan began sharing his story at workplace diversity seminars, helping companies understand that inclusion wasn't about policies on paper, but about daily actions and genuine respect. His experience became a catalyst for change that extended far beyond his personal journey. On quiet evenings, Evan often sat beneath the oak tree his father had planted, feeling a profound sense of peace. On the workshop wall now hung the pride photo of father and son, alongside Thomas's Red Sox cap and Army badge, symbols of a journey from rejection to acceptance, from misunderstanding to love. When a young LGBTQ+ employee from another tech company reached out to thank him for inspiring them to stand up for their rights in the workplace, Evan realized that sometimes our greatest impact comes not from staying where we're tolerated, but from leaving to create spaces where others can be celebrated. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find your true worth? Would you have the courage to reclaim your dignity by taking back everything they never valued? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more powerful reminders that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most authentic lives.